Les saludamos, amigas y amigos, desde Canal UCR, este medio televisivo que se paga con los impuestos que tributan los habitantes de este país, y lo hacemos en este año del 75 aniversario de la Universidad de Costa Rica y del 75 aniversario de la Orquesta Sinfónica Nacional, y para rendirle un homenaje a la orquesta tenemos el privilegio de tener con nosotros a el maestro Carl St. Clair, director titular de la orquesta, con quien conversaremos una vez que el canal nos invite a hacerlo. Regresamos. Maestro St. Clair, when was the first time that you recall having heard the term Costa Rica, and if in your youth in Texas, which I understand you did elementary school, did you ever dream of having the important role that you have now in Costa Rica as the director of our orchestra, which is now yours?
Well, first of all, thank you, Professor, for having me on your show. It's a great honor to be here. And actually, I grew up in a small town in Texas with about 35 people, a farming community. So hearing about New York was also very foreign, or hearing about Chicago or London or Paris, much less Costa Rica. But actually, we had some friends who came to Costa Rica to visit the National Forest and to take tours in the rivers. And so one of my close friends who lived not very far from me spoke about Costa Rica when I was a teenager. And so that was my first, ever hearing of the country Costa Rica and how beautiful it was. And because I grew up in South Texas, in a place where classical music was it was not at all heard. We had no symphony orchestras, we had no orchestra in the school, we had nothing but a high school marching band and this and that and the other. This has become one of my dreams and one of my real missions as music director of the OSN, and that is to make sure that we tour the country of Costa Rica, that we perform in cities all throughout the country, especially those places like the place I grew up that never had a chance. I was 17 years old the first time I heard a symphony orchestra. And
Amazing.
For a person who spent the rest of their life as a music director or as a conductor or a musician, I just don't want that to happen in Costa Rica. And we're a small enough, contained enough country that the National Orchestra of this beautiful country should be able to go out and to play in concerts in cities that have never heard a symphony orchestra, so that those little boys and girls like I was in South Texas don't have to wait until they're 17 years old to actually hear a symphony orchestra. And that's why last year we went to Limón, and while this year we're leaving tomorrow to go to Guanacaste to play in 4 different cities, and 3 of those cities we have never played before. And I know that we're going to have many percent of our audience, probably 90 or 95% of the audience members who perhaps never have heard a symphony orchestra ever. And so that's a great, great love of ours, a great passion of mine. As a matter of fact, this year, as I know, we're celebrating each of the university and the National Symphony, we're celebrating our 75th year together, our 75th anniversary. The orchestra will have played in all 7 provinces by the end of this season. That was our mission as a gift back to the country for supporting this great orchestra for the last 75 years.
One thing that, and I'm very happy to hear that, and I'm sure that the audience will listen to you and be aware that there orchestra is visiting them. But besides that, you are a very innovative or a very forward conductor as far as I can see. And one of the things that I learned is that your work with Leonard Bernstein, who among other things did the play West Side Story, which is bringing Romeo and Juliet into a modern urban New York City environment and bring it into a very great artistic context. You have been doing things very creative and very much putting into people's mind and ears.
Well, you know, I think as the life of a symphony orchestra and as the traditions of the life of an orchestra get older and further and more centuries away from the Mozarts and the Bachs and the times of Beethoven and Haydn and Brahms, we have to realize that we have to continually be relevant to a modern 21st century audience, especially the young people. Our world has changed so drastically. We all know that. I have a 13 and a 14-year-old, son and daughter, and I know their worlds are completely different than mine, and I know that their futures will be completely different than yours or mine was back when we were that age. We constantly, as a symphony orchestra, have to remain relevant in their lives. We have to have some connection. And the days of just being a traditional 19th century, 18th century orchestra, playing concerts and having people come, we play, they leave, I think is really has to be questioned. We have to give them an experience that's more parallel, that's more in sync with what they're experiencing outside in their daily lives. And so that's why we try to continually connect our music with the audiences, whether it be through speakers or whether it be through visual additions or through somehow or another allowing them in ways to understand the music that they're hearing it, so that it becomes a communal experience, not of we play, you listen, you go home, we go home. What happens in the concert hall today has to be more community-wise. It has to be more communal, that it's a shared experience, not you have your experience and we have our experience. So that that proverbial wall that exists between the footlights of the stage and the first row of seats in the concert hall is somehow or another erased, so that the audience realizes that we're there to aid them, that we're there to help them, to give them a couple of hours of enlightenment, of education, of growing their spirits, of perhaps bringing them out of a dark place, or perhaps giving them 2 hours of time where they don't have to think about all the troubles or the various problems that they might be facing in their own daily life. So my main feeling about orchestral program and music in general is that music for music's sake is not enough. In other words, music doesn't exist in our world, in our human existence, just so that we can play and you can hear. Okay, I'm a devout Catholic, and in the Bible it simply says, on earth as it is in heaven. So this music that we're playing is not new. I mean, it comes from those heavens, and those composers, those great composers, like Beethoven and like Shostakovich and like Tchaikovsky and like Brahms, and you know who I mean, all of the great ones, they have been given a certain key, a certain permission to reach into those heavens, to bring back this incredible music for us, for a purpose. And that purpose is to change minds, to change hearts, to develop young spirits and young souls to understand the importance of beauty of this great music.
Well, you are partially, and allow me to say so, partially a prophet and partially a revolutionary. And the August concert that was recently performed is one case in point. you started with Bach, but so the orchestra was small, and there was a Costa Rican, actually your concertino player, taking back to the middle, to the Bach era, with beauty that had nothing to forecast that we were having Ives 6 or 7 minutes little piece that you, when I listen to the orchestra, you as to be explained to us, and it was really something that the audience could take better. Furthermore, when at the end of the second part you had Sostakovich, Lady Macbeth piece, you arranged it in a way that I had never seen in my experience, and it was really I could pinch myself. And before I ask you to comment on that, I'm going to mention that in this season, because of the 75th anniversary, you had included a lot of pieces by Costa Rican composers, and that's something that I'm very grateful for as a Costa Rican to you, our conductor.
A couple of comments on that, and I appreciate these wonderful questions because it gives me a chance to express my feelings and to express my thoughts about things. Number one, when I became the music director of the National Symphony, I had 4 important missions. One, as I spoke earlier, was to take the National Symphony into all areas of the country. Number 2 was to work with young Costa Rican conductors, to help them, to groom them, to mentor them, which we started last year with our debut concert in the National Theatre with 3 young, incredibly talented. The third was to work with young composers, to give those composers, those young Costa Rican composers who were composing music, who never had a chance to hear one single realized note of their composition, to give them a chance to hear their music. And fourth is to do all I can to continue to elevate the artistic integrity of our great beacon of cultural attainment, the National Symphony. So those are the 4 things. When it comes to...
maybe we will ask at this point the TV station to give the listeners and viewers a message, and then we will come back.
Okay.
Maestro Sancler, you just laid down the 4 important missions that you envision your role as conductor and musical director of our national orchestra, and you were going to comment more on that.
Yeah, I really appreciate your comment and your observations. I'm so happy that you enjoyed our concerts from this last weekend. You know, the thing about this particular program, every concert on our 75th anniversary will either feature a Costa Rican composition or a Costa Rican soloist or a Costa Rican conductor. In this case, 2 or more conductors throughout the season. Because I think that the country of Costa Rica and its people need to realize that what you have here is unique and very special in the world. That you're growing and developing your own generations of future musicians, music lovers, and music appreciators. And so this past week, the program on the surface might have seemed a little bit disconnected. But to start with, you know, our concertino, you know, maestro, you know, Jose Aurelio Castillo, as the soloist, is a major, major statement. Here is the concertino of the National Orchestra. There's the primo position in the country. And there he is standing playing none other than one of the most beautiful concertos by Johann Sebastian Bach, which when you think of Bach, you think of him as our musical saint. He wrote a lot of his music in the St. Thomas Kirche in Leipzig, Germany. He wrote so many oratorios, so many cantatas. This is just absolute pure music. And if you think of where the journey took us to the last movement of the 10th Symphony, we had to start with purity. We couldn't start with something loud, with something bombastic. The second piece on the program, which Aurora Sine so beautifully talked about, is Charles Ives' The Unanswered Question. And as you mentioned, it's a very short 6 or 7 minute piece, but it was written in 1908, at least a half a century before people were writing, composers were writing aleatoric music. But even more importantly, that Charles Ives was so far ahead of his time was the fact that in music he was asking the proverbial, the continually asked question that we do every day about the nature of human existence, why we exist, what is it that and why we are here. And the strings played this beautiful palette of sound, and the four flutes discussed the answer to this question which was posed by this distant trumpet. At the end, every time they started to try to answer, it became more confused and more agitated and longer, and yet at the end, we're still left with the question. We still did it, and that's why this piece is so profound.
Yes.
Because then what came next is a little interlude, 2.5 minutes from Lady Macbeth, which was an opera written by Shostakovich in 1934. This is an important opera in the life of Shostakovich because it marked the breaking point between Shostakovich, the great, most famous composer, the most heralded composer in Russia at that time, and then the next day he's persona non grata, fearing for his life, all because of a moment in time where the ruler Joseph Stalin came to hear that opera and wrote a terrible, scorching review in Pravda the next day. That's why that was there, because what happened after that was the 5th Symphony, the 7th Symphony, and finally after Mr. Stalin passed away and died in 1953, interestingly enough, on the same day that Prokofiev died. Then he commenced to writing his reflections of that era. And because of that, these notes came on the page. Because of that, these emotions flowed from him onto the composition page. The audience needed to understand that. They needed to understand the context, the contextualization of this time in Shostakovich's life, where he was psychologically, where he was emotionally, where he was as a man, where he was as a composer. Because without those facts, this piece would never exist the way it existed. But for me, it's not just to listen to a piece of music willy-nilly and not understand anything. I have to have meaning. I have to help you understand that there is deeper meaning behind each of these notes, that it is autobiographical, that it's really a composer giving you his deepest, most inner emotion and feeling. And if I can do that to you, when you hear this incredibly powerful symphony, your experience will be much different. It will be much more profound. The reason we did that, which we did with Aurora Sines and with incredible actor Ricardo Duran, was to help, to connect, to help the listener have a communication and a musical journey with us that had deep, deep meaning. It wasn't so that we could put on a show. It was so that those people who came could have an honest, enlightening experience with one of the greatest symphonies written by one of the greatest composers. And if I even accomplished half of that, I feel so powerfully thankful for that. And I was so happy to hear your words, Professor Vargas, that you found it exciting, that you found it interesting, and that it did, in fact, enhance your concert-going experience.
Another issue with the orchestra, after Di Figueres, Guido Sáenz duo build the
reorganization right.
of the orchestra. One key issue, and actually you had invited Gerald Brown for the first concert of the season.
Oh, that was great.
And it was nice to see him, but one of the key roles of Maestro Brown was to start this what is now the National Center for the Arts, that with the new generations, and actually many of the foreigners that came into the country to play at the orchestra were the teachers of the young generation. How do you see the role both of the orchestra and how you see? I realize that this is only half of your second year with the orchestra, but how you see those people who will play once I'm gone? I have the age that I look like, so sooner rather than later I'll be gone. But those who will be playing at the orchestra and playing in many places of Costa Rica, how do you see those generations?
Well, first of all, let me correct you. It's going to be later than before it's sooner that you're going to be gone. Let me just tell you that. You're too alive, you've got too much life, you have too many things going on in your mind and in your heart. You're too important to us, to the station, to the economic world, to the students that are here in the university. So you're going to be around a long time, I promise you that. But to answer your question, it was historic. It was historic. Can you imagine? Can you think of another orchestra where 3 music directors are standing arm in arm in front of their audience, in front of their orchestra? I mean, I can't tell you how emotionally powerful and impactful that was to me, to be the present music director in such a long line of important musical contributors to the musical life of Costa Rica. To have Gerald Brown and to have Erwin Hoffman and me, and we also, by the way, I just wanted to go on record, we did invite Mr. Komatsu, who was after Mr. Hoffman, but he was unable to come. But the point was, I wanted to share the history. And it was so touching and so overly emotional because members of our National Symphony who are adults with families, you know, mothers and dads, were bringing photographs of them standing with their violin or with their oboe or something like that with Gerald Brown when they were 9 and 10 years old. Yeah. And it was such an important moment, and it made such an important statement to the whole country and frankly to the world how important the cultural essence is here in Costa Rica for the minds and hearts of especially young people. You just think, what would these young people be doing today had they not had a chance to pick up a violin or a clarinet or a trombone or a cello or any of the other wonderful instruments? What would they be doing today? I can't imagine. They couldn't have done anything more important than to have had a chance to pick up that musical instrument and to continually give back. My feeling is that God gave us a talent of music, and it's our job and our thankfulness to Him, what we do with it and how we give it back. And that particular weekend of concerts was for me one of the most important moments I think I will ever experience as a music director. To have all 3 of us standing together celebrating the 75th anniversary of this incredible orchestra. And when you ask the question about what's going to be the future, you know, one of the things that really attracted me to become the music director of the National Orchestra was the fact that 99% of the orchestra are musicians from Costa Rica. You know, they are Costa Rican. They were born here. Many of them studied. They came up through our system. They were trained here. And now they have committed their lives to continually giving back to the country by celebrating through music. I mean, we have musicians in the orchestra that have played in the orchestra over 4 decades. Can you imagine? Born here, studied here, and have been playing, giving of their talents for more than 4 decades, teaching others, teaching future generations. That to me is inspirational. That to me shows a kind of character and honor that you don't find everywhere. And that's one of the things that really inspire me about the National Symphony and my work with them.
Well, and to bring it to your own experience, you said that you spent the early part of your life in a small town, rural area, and so you could understand what Jose Figueres said, and I will say first in Spanish and then in English. ¿Para qué tractores sin violines? What is the reason for tractors if we don't have violins?
Yeah, what a great comment. I love that. I really love that. And, you know, and in my feeling about life, when I'm no longer with us in this realm, I can only take with me what I gave, not what I got.
Great. That's another great statement. We have like one more minute left with the audience. What will be the final message that you will want to give to the university, give to the country, give to our audience?
You know that my entire life has not only been spent as a professional conductor, but I've always had a strong connection to universities. I went to the University of Texas at Austin. I taught in Southern Illinois University. I taught at the University of Michigan. I've been on the faculties of USC. I've been guest at Indiana University, Juilliard School of Music. I mean, and I now enjoy a really strong relationship with this university, and I hope that it will continue, and I hope that we have a stronger and stronger connection between our two great institutions, the National Orchestra and the university. As we both are 75 years old, we have grown into adulthood together, hand in hand. It should continue.
Great comment, and I will respectfully ask our audience to listen to our program next week on the same times and circumstances as you did this week. Thank you for being in Costa Rica.
Gracias, Professor.